Shabbat Shalom and welcome back. It is my very special honor to welcome Rabbi Hillel Silverman once again to our VBS live broadcast and to share a few words of Torah with us. Rabbi, good morning. Shabbat Shalom.
Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Rabbi, we're commemorating Memorial Day this weekend and celebrating all of those who have served to protect America. I understand that you were in the service at one point.
Yes, I was. I was in the Marine Corps. I served during the Korean War and Vietnam in Paris Island boot camp. And then the Navy sent me to Italy, and I served there. I remained in the reserves for 20 years and went out a commander, which is a lieutenant colonel.
Well, that's very good. That's very honorable. That's wonderful. So do you have a recollection of a particular experience as you were when you were serving?
Yes, and in Paris Island, we had a Seder. It was boot camp, and there were 700 boots from New York, most of them, at the Seder. At the Seder also was the commanding general, Silverthorne. And when we came to the Afikoman, I was in the middle of the mess hall, and he was at one big long table with chaplains of other faiths. And I said, "Who stole the Afikoman?" Well, by then he had so much Manischewitz wine, he was inebriated almost. He said, "Who stole? You cannot steal during this time or any time on my base. Whoever stole the Afikoman will go to the brig, the prison." And they said to him, to the prison, he'll have to be on bread and water. He can't be that on bread and water for 10 days. And what did he want? The one who asked for the Afikoman, Private Brody, he wanted a 10-day leave, which of course is not granted at boot camp. Well, finally, the commanding general Silverthorne went to the microphone again, and he said, "I am the commanding general, and I say 10-day leave granted." All the Marines stood up and applauded, and he did go out on a 10-day leave, and he never came back. He was at AWOL.
That's wonderful. Well, Rabbi, this week we read Parsha Bamidbar. We begin a new book of the Torah. So please tell us what we're learning this week.
Our Torah reading is Bamidbar, in the wilderness. And the reason we call it in the wilderness, it's the first line of the Sedra. They were in the wilderness. In English, it's called Numbers. It's called Numbers because of the Septuagint, which translated the second verse, Numbers. Now, it's an interesting juxtaposition of these two words, Midbar in the wilderness and Numbers, which has to do with the census. And we can learn from this, the rabbis say, that when you are concerned with only numbers, you are wandering in the wilderness. There is much more to Judaism and the Jewish people than numbers. Then you're in the wilderness, and that's quality. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, quality. We read of the census right away as the children of Israel gathered together. Now, this is not the first census in the Torah. The first census is in the book of Exodus. When the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea, Moses would like to know how many they are. And so there is a census. And it's the strangest census in history because he doesn't really count the people. They all bring a half a shekel, and he counts the shekalim. He multiplies times 2. And that is how he arrives at the number of the Jewish people. And we can learn from this, the rabbis say, you don't count everybody. You count those who give. You count those who can be counted. There's another census in the Bible. It comes much later in the book of Kings. It's King David. King David also would like to know how many are the children of Israel. Joab, his general, discourages him. He says, "You will be punished for counting the people." And so David is severely punished. And the tradition is that you really shouldn't count people. When you need a minyan, you never say 1, 2, 3. You say nicht eins, nicht zwei, nicht drei. Not 1, not 2, not 3. People are sacred. they shouldn't be counted. You count money, you count food, you count equipment, but you don't count people. My wife Bobby's family is in Ashdod, and it's a large family, and there are many, many children and many, many grandchildren. And I asked the grandfather, Papa Shimon, how many grandchildren do you have? He would never tell me how many grandchildren. He would say, well, and I don't know exactly. Don't ask me. You don't count. Now, in tomorrow's Sedra, you have the people counted. Sa'u et Rosh. Count the people. The rabbis tell us the word Sa'u is interesting. It means exalt. We exalt the mind and we exalt the head. As far as the Jewish people is concerned, we exalt their mind, their intellectual study, and you exalt the head. You stand erect, you stand with dignity, and you stand with self-confidence. Now, there's another census mentioned tomorrow morning, and that's the Levites, the Levites. At the age of 1 month, they are counted. Now, the other people are counted when they are 20 years old. And the rabbis tell us that we are a combination, really, of the Levites, noblesse oblige. We have a heritage and a tradition. And when we are mature and when we achieve and when we're 20, then we can be counted. So let's talk a little bit about numbers today. In the United States, there are how many Jews? 6 million. 6 million Jews. That's a very, very small number. That's only 2% of the population of our country. And you look at the United States and you discover that in the Supreme Court, there are 3 Supreme Court justices, and out of 9, that's 33%, 33 and a third percent are Jewish. When you look at the Congress, you look at the Senate and the House of Representatives, you discover there are 11 or 12% of them are Jewish out of a population of 10%. We have contributed so much in quality to our country in science, in physics, in chemistry, in biology, and mathematics. So many doctors and lawyers, so many authors, and in entertainment, in movies, and television. So we are a very small minority in this country, but we are known for the quality of our people. Only 2% and equivalent to so many, many more. In our city of Los Angeles, how many Jews are there? Approximately 600,000 Jews. That's the largest Jewish population, not the largest, the second largest population in the world. But I wonder how many can be counted. How many Jews in Los Angeles belong to a synagogue? I'm unhappy to report it's less than 50%. How many Jews out of the 600,000 participate in Jewish life? How many quality Jews are there? I don't think there are 600,000, but those who count are counted. Israel is celebrating its 72nd anniversary this year. How many Jews live? I lived in Israel 72 years ago, about 750,000. To remind you of the history of Israel, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine by a vote of 73 to 17. And so the country was born. I remember I happened to be in Israel at that time. I was there for a year. I was a junior student at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and I spent the junior year supposedly at the Hebrew University. Unfortunately, the Hebrew University closed after 3 weeks because of the War of Liberation. I'll never forget my experience at Zion which is a religious kibbutz. I happened to go there the weekend that the United Nations voted to partition Palestine. I really didn't know that it would be then. And I recall so vividly that I was sleeping in the kibbutz at 3 o'clock in the morning. There was a knock on the door. Get up, get up. The United Nations had voted to partition Palestine into two countries, Israel and for the Arabs. And so they sang. We went to the dining room, many of us in pajamas, and they sang and they danced the hora. It was so exciting. And then the next day, actually it was Sunday, we took a bus back to Jerusalem. It was about a 2-hour ride, and the entire city was gathered together in all of the streets and all of the places, and they were dancing and they were singing and they were speaking. I remember now, I know because I happened to look at a scrapbook that I had articles which I was writing to papers from Jerusalem to Hartford, Connecticut, which is where I lived. And I read an article of how they celebrated that day in Jerusalem. They were so excited. And there was an old Yemenite Jew on a donkey, and he was recapitulating what the Bible said about the liberation of Jerusalem when the Messiah would come on a donkey. And behind it was a little donkey, an offspring, and there were bagels tied to his holster. And so Israel became a state on that day. There were 750,000 Jews. I remember that I received my basic training shortly thereafter. Like many of the Americans and rabbis who were in Jerusalem at the time, we enlisted for the Haganah. And of course, the Haganah became the army on May the 14th. And I remember I remember the 35, the Lamed Hay, who came from where we had basic training. They were 35 young students of the Hebrew University, and they went up to Kfar Etzion, which was a religious kibbutz with weapons and ammunition, each one carrying 60 pounds on their back. And these 35 were never heard from again, and their bodies were found 2 days later, mutilated. They didn't have a walkie-talkie. Had they had a walkie-talkie, they would have been able to reach the kibbutz. And so we had our training. It was a laugh. It really wasn't training for the war. The whole training was 3 or 4 days. For example, we had no equipment. We had no helmets. We had no boots. We were trained on 6 or 7 different rifles. Why so many? Because you never knew what kind of a rifle you would receive the next day. A Palestinian, a Canadian rifle, a United States rifle, Italian rifle, Polish rifle, German rifle. I was a machine gunner, and they gave us a machine gun from the First World War. It was called a Schwarz Loser. 4 men to a gun, water cooled. It was really something. Of course, England, if you know your history, had the mandate and continued with the mandate from November of 1947 until the declaration of the state in May the 14th, 1948. And there you had a situation with the British in control, the British fighting the members of the Haganah and taking their weapons away from them, and the Arabs. It was a terrible period. We were stationed on a little moshav called Har Tuv, and there I was with my machine gun from the First World War. My company and I were the great heroes on the kibbutz. They ran out of food, and so for 2 weeks we had sardines and chalava. To this day, I can't look a sardine or any chalava in his face. I had to leave from Har Tuv, and I went to Jerusalem for a few days. It was a completely different situation. In Khartoum, we were surrounded by Arabs, and Jerusalem was so beautiful. The sun had come out, there were clouds in the sky. And I went to the movies, and I remember that movie, I've never forgotten, Miracle on 34th Street. I'm sure that some of you have seen that movie. I was so nostalgic because I saw Times Square in New York and Santa Claus. And then we went back to our stations. I was with a group. Our commanding officer was Nachum, and he was a handsome guy, blonde, blue-eyed. He loved to wear the latest uniforms, and he was killed. He was shot in the face in an invasion, and there was Polanski, and I found out later that he became the ambassador to Poland, and there were two Iraqi soldiers in our group, and their nicknames were Efes and Chatzi Efes, nothing and half of nothing. And there was Shlomo, who was a partisan who fought for Poland. These days were days that I'll never forget. Abba Eban made the statement after the war that the Arabs never forget, never give up. Let's see, how does that go, Eddie? The Arabs never give up. The Arabs never give up an opportunity to give up an opportunity.
Never lost an opportunity.
Yes, never lost an opportunity.
Right. That was a beautiful saying of Abba.
Beautiful
Very
statement.
sad, by the way.
And the Arabs in Israel had many opportunities, given so much to make peace and never accepted. Ben Gurion said at the same time, Israel can afford to lose only one war, not like other countries. If Israel loses one war, they are decimated. They are completely destroyed. And as you know, there were many wars in the 72 years, especially the Six-Day War. That was a war that will never be forgotten. The Jews were threatened to be overwhelmed by 5 Arab nations, and we were starting to think it would be another Holocaust. And then we went to sleep on a Sunday night. Miracle of miracles, on Monday, a British commentator said the war is over. Israel had a preemptive war on the Egyptian Air Force. They destroyed all of the planes. And then on Wednesday, Jerusalem was redeemed. And then on Friday, the Golan Heights, where the Jews went straight up and retrieved the Golan from the Syrians. It was unbelievable. And the Jews survived all these years, 750. Now it's a country of 8 million. And still it's not enough, because quality is much more important than numbers. And still Israel is survived these 2,000 years, and it was a miracle, an exile of 2,000 years where the Jews flourished in those 2,000 years. When they left Israel, flourished in Babylonia, flourished in Spain, flourished in so many different countries, and now returning to Israel, celebrating, imagine, 72 years of great accomplishment. Israel has done so much in industry, in science, in medicine, in startup companies. We can't even begin to contemplate how much Israel has accomplished in 72 years. We hope and we pray that our virus will find a solution soon, that there will be a vaccine. I understand there are 8 different companies in the United States who are on the brink of discovery of a vacuum. Well, I read in the Israeli press, there is one company that is also on the brink of a discovery of the virus. Now, I'm not predicting anything, I'm not suggesting, but I will not be shocked if the discovery of the vaccine is a Jew, just as the polio vaccine was discovered by Salk. We're people of quality, not a people of numbers. We counted our people by bringing shekalim, each one a half a shekel. We counted only those who counted. We counted those who count. And so I say that our values that we're bringing are the values of ethics and morality, of faith and family, of character, of responsibility, of kindness, of so much more, of people of quality. Lo b'chayil v'lo b'choach, not by power or by might, but by the Spirit of God. Let us conclude by saying, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people still lives. Amen.
Am Yisrael Chai, Rabbi. Thank you so very, very much. And I wish you and your family a really good Shabbos. Take good care. Thank you for sharing with us this Shabbat.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.